So this is about end-of-life doulas and home funeral guides. And my idea is to present some information and then just open it up for questions and answers afterwards. So let me see if I can get to the new screen. Ha, there it is. Okay, so this is sort of a document. It's a Venn diagram that I came up with along with Lee Webster when we were both on the board of the National Home Funeral Alliance. And it shows the continuum in the death care environment. Now, I have a little circle off on the left which says hospice, which I just added for this presentation, because really the role of the end-of-life doula and home funeral guide sort of comes after hospice. And hospice is for palliative care or comfort care. And in the United States, it's 6 months or less that you have to live, and then you can go on hospice. But it's become very medicalized in the United States. So a lot of the softer aspects of it, like the sitting vigil with people and talking to people, a lot of those softer skills have gone away because now everything has to be billable. And so it's sort of changed the nature of hospice here. Hospice does cover the next circle, which is end-of-life planning. And I hope everyone here has a healthcare power of attorney designated so that if something happens to you and you can't speak for yourself, that you will have somebody who can step in and make sure your wishes are forward. So that's so important. And the end-of-life doula circle, this is something that's come about recently. It's been in the works for years, but it's more of a recent emergence. And from this presentation, down at the bottom, there's some terms that have been thrown around, such as death doula, death midwife, death transition guide, end-of-life guide, Thana doula, psychopomp. So these were some of the terms that were in use, but pretty much the system has settled on end-of-life doula. So that's what you're going to hear more of. And the same thing happened with the home funeral guide when we were just starting these organizations. You also hear that called death midwife or family funeral guide. So I'm going to explain what a death doula or end-of-life doula does in just a second. The last thing I want to point out on this chart is in the lower right-hand corner, the circle that says celebrant. Officiant is another terminology or ceremonialist. So you have this sort of spectrum from hospice, end-of-life planning, end-of-life doula, to a home funeral guide, celebrant, that walks with the family as they go through the end of life of a dear one. Okay, I'm changing slides. Okay, so this is my opinion. And in the bottom left-hand corners, you can see it says source, in my humble opinion, Donna Belk. So this is not verifiable. It's just what I have found in my practice, that there are really three main aspects, energy, things you have to think about as you're working with a dying person. The physical aspects, such as their comfort, how the room is set up, emotional aspects, their beliefs about death, forgiveness, and spiritual aspects, such as what their beliefs are. Are you going to be a spiritual advisor to a dying person? And I want to make note of this afterlife guidance. I'm going to talk about that later on, so I'm going to bookmark it here. And then there are many tools that can be used, such as music and singing and healing touch. And those can be used in any of these areas, physical area to soothe emotional aspects or the spiritual area. So I sort of see these elements as weaving through every situation with the dying person. And sometimes there's more focus on the physical, and sometimes there's more focus on the spiritual. And here is a good description of what the end-of-life doulas provide. And this is from the National End-of-Life Doula Alliance, which is a new organization. And again, it has really come on the scene and just been formed within the year. So they provide presence, being a good listener, nurturing, troubleshooting challenges. They provide emotional support, information sharing. They can be a proactive guide in anticipating needs and making a plan, a deathing plan. They can provide resources and referrals. And then also they can have some knowledge of comfort measures and physical support, like help with positioning the person to be more comfortable. And then logistical support can include like household help and transporting to medical appointments. So this is very non-medical. So really at the hospice point, that's where the medical care sort of ends. And now we get into this soft support. And the end-of-life doulas are providing that. I have a slide here that just has more information, which I can put in the chat box a little later on. But there's a National End-of-Life Doula Alliance here in the U.S., a National Home Funeral Alliance in the U.S., and also an End-of-Life Doula Directory in Australia, and Soul Midwives, and this is really the child of Felicity Warner in the UK. So you can see that this is not just US based, that there's a wonderful directory in Australia and a good network in the UK as well. So one of the things that the end-of-life doula, one of the things that has happened is that it's come out of sort of burned out hospice workers or volunteers who really see a need for this other type of service, but it hasn't been provided. So the end-of-life doula has sort of come about. And most of them see this as a paid-for service. In other words, they would like to get paid for the service they provide. So I'm gonna just do that as an overview of end-of-life doula. And please remember, all these overlap. And now I'm going to talk about a home funeral guide. And many of the things a doula provides can be provided by the home funeral guide. So the best way to talk about it is to show pictures. And this is a picture of a home funeral for a woman named Harriet. So it's going to be pictures with a dead body. So just please know that if you don't want to watch, you don't have to. So this is honoring Harriet. And here is Harriet and her son, Roger. And they used to love to play Scrabble together. It was her favorite pastime. And so in this instance, the family sort of acted as the end-of-life doula because they talked back and forth very openly about it. Roger talked to me about helping out at the time when Harriet died, so I was available to him. Now, Roger and his brother made the coffin, the casket, And here you see them both. There, Roger is he was a Lutheran minister, so he doesn't really have a lot of woodworking skills. And you can see this casket is gigantic. You could fit 2 people in that casket. It's so deep. But it was done with a lot of love, and they were very proud of it. And this is a picture of just after Harriet died. And you can see she's still in her hospital gown. So I'm over there on the left, and Roger's on the right, and then his daughter is standing next to him. So everyone was standing around a little awkwardly at this point, and so I wanted to facilitate the washing of the body, which is an optional thing. They wanted to do it and saw it as their last way to care for Harriet. So you can see the daughter has a bucket with some soapy water, and so I got a washcloth and I really just put it up against Harriet's face and neck to get things started, and then I handed it to Roger, and he took over and did some of the washing, and then he was just too overcome to do any more, so he handed it over to his daughter. And then Roger went to get some letters that Harriet had written, and he stood at the head of the bed and read the letters from Harriet as the daughters and granddaughters washed Harriet's body. Now, during this, the modesty is maintained at all times because you don't want to make people uncomfortable. So out of respect for the dead person and out of the respect for the live people helping, everything is done sort of covered and very modestly. So here Harriet had been put in her favorite polka dot dress, and the family was getting ready to move her to the homemade casket, which Harriet called her hope chest because she was hopeful of the resurrection or life after death. And here you see the family. They bunched up the quilt, and you really need about, I think, at least 6 to 8 people to carry a body. And here they're beginning to do that. So they carried Harriet, and they put her in the casket, and she was on a sleeping bag that the family had used on their trips, and the granddaughters are placing some flowers in her hand and some Mardi Gras beads on her. And I like to point out that Harriet's eyes are a little bit open, and her mouth is also a little bit open. And the family didn't have any problem with this. They thought she just sort of looked like she was sleeping. If this were in a funeral home, they have very effective but intrusive ways of making sure that the eyes and the mouth stay shut. But they're very, very intrusive, and to me it feels violent. So I liked it that the family was comfortable with this, with her after-death look. So the casket was placed outside on the porch because it was in January and it was cool, so they didn't have to worry about cooling the body. And the idea was that the next day, the casket, I thought this was a beautiful picture of the vigil, the casket was going to be carried to the truck, and they were going to drive Harriet up to Minnesota. Now here the family is moving the casket themselves. These are the granddaughters. And I really like to remark here that they're smiling. They're not overcome with grief or wringing their hands or walking around wondering what they could do. They need to do something, but what can it be? They're participating. They feel like they're being of service and showing honor and love to Harriet. And they're smiling as they go about this work. It was very fulfilling for them. And here the casket is in the truck, and it's Harriet's hope chest, her coffin. And I like to point out here that there are kids involved. They didn't shoo the kids in the other room. They were allowed to see everything as it went on, which I think gives them a more realistic view of death and um, how to care for a loved one in a very natural and loving, organic way. Here they're covering the casket in order to make that drive up to Minnesota, and you can't really tell it very well, but they didn't measure right when they built the casket, so it didn't they couldn't close the the back hatch. They had just had to tie it in and drive up there without the very back of the truck being closed. It was just the measurement was off by 6 inches or so. But again, kids involved, whole family. And they drove up to the church, took the casket out, held a church service, memorial service for Harriet, a beautiful spray of flowers on top. They decorated the casket with photos of her, and they glued a Scrabble board to the very top of the casket. And the tiles, the Scrabble tiles going down one way said love, and then tiles going across said God. So I thought it was a very dignified service, even with the homemade casket. And this is the last picture, what Roger considers his last family picture of Harriet before she was lowered into the grave. So honoring Harriet. Just a few slides about Fern, honoring Fern. Fern was a Wiccan priestess, and she had a 3-day vigil at home where they laid her out. And then she was wrapped in her mother's quilt and tied to a carrying board. And you can see the board on the left. It has handles for carrying. I just thought they made this so beautiful. It's not just one square board, but they shaped it for space for the head and space for the feet, and then the lovely handholds that they created. And also on Fern's body, her face is covered by the quilt as well. So she was had a 3-day vigil at home. In her situation, she had dry ice placed under the body, behind the shoulders and the hips, to keep the body cool. And that's a law in Texas that you have to cool the body within 24 hours. And then she was carried to the gravesite. And here they wanted to see her one last time, so they pulled back the covering on her face and said prayers and looked at her as they prepared to lower her into the casket. There's a woman standing in the background in white, and she has between her legs, there's a little kid sitting there. So again, the little kid participating in this very natural burial process. The rope that they're holding is knotted to give them a good handhold as they lower her. So the boards that are going across the graves will be removed, and then they'll lower her in. And here she is with, she's been lowered, and she has rose petals all around her for her final resting place. This is considered a green burial. There's no concrete container to hold the body. It's straight into the earth. There's no casket. It's just covered in a shroud, her mother's quilt. And at a home funeral conference several years back, the people that were talking about home funerals said that they felt it demystified death, it evoked the spiritual aspects, it helped diminish fear. It was individual, economical, bonding of community. So it has a lot of positive results to the home funeral. I've never heard anyone say they wish they had not done a home funeral. And this is an example of green burial over on the right. It's a green burial cemetery. And then sort of what's the standard cemetery here in the United States. And you look at that standard cemetery and the idea is this is where life ends. But you look at the green burial cemetery and there's this sense of life continues. So green burials are becoming more popular here in the United States. And there's now a Green Burial Council to help facilitate their growth. So these next few slides are taken of my mother's funeral, and she died June 1st of this year and was buried June 9th. And so what I like about this, homemade casket, pink homemade casket. She loved flowers, the spray, beautiful spray of flowers on top. But I really love this juxtaposition of the headstones in the background in military precision. This is a military cemetery in Texas. And they're all lined up, and but yet here's this sort of this, I don't know, riot of color and hand craftsmanship and in the foreground. And this was one of the things that we did on the side of her casket was for family members to put their handprints. So family and friends put their handprints all around to decorate one side of the casket. And I have to give it to the guys that were doing the actual lowering and burial. They were so reverent, even with the pink casket. They handled it like it was made out of mahogany. They were so reverent and efficient. And this is it being lowered into my father's grave. And the military, if you have a military burial here, the spouses are both buried in the same plot. And then this is just, they finished, they covered the grave, and the flowers remain as a final memorial. Okay. So now I'm going to go back to the afterlife guidance that I said, bookmark this, we're going to come back to it. This again is in my humble opinion. So this is not really being addressed by the end-of-life doulas right now. They tend to look back towards legacy work, telling your story, doing forgiveness. They don't really look ahead as to what can come. And so this is what I feel is a missing piece in the end-of-life doula work. And part of that is it's a young movement. This is evolving. Many of the people come out of the hospice movement where this type of information is not really touched. And there's a reticence to talk about these issues, these spiritual issues. So here's what I think afterlife guidance should look like. Maybe start with some near-death experience stories that are anecdotal, but there's so many to choose from that a person could hear as many stories as they want. Practice meditations and visualizations. Practice dying. And like Stephen Levine in his book, This Is How It Is to Die, is a meditation about dying. Uplifting poetry can also be used to sort of elevate and start a conversation about afterlife. Channeled material, mediumship, where people are talking to spirits or people who have died. And end-of-life readings. This was something new to me, but I saw it on YouTube on Alison Dubow's site. And she mentions a couple of her end-of-life readings, and I thought, what a good idea. And then also, as another level of afterlife guidance could be out-of-body experiences, or as Swedenborg says, spiritual travel. And there are a couple of organizations that touch on this a bit, the Shared Crossing Project, and then also the Dreamwalker Death Transition Guide, which is part of the organization called Crimson Circle. And then a guidebook is what I think is just excellent. And there's a book called Beyond the Veil, Our Journey Home by Diane Goebel. And I studied with her for a while and took her course about becoming a death transition guide. And I thought the guidebook was just the best. And so I really recommend this book of Diane's. It really talks about here's what you do, step one. So here's a guidebook for, here's my guidebook for the dying. So I printed out all the poetry that I thought was uplifting, and I put it in sheet protectors, and I then wrote little notes on it and said, like, I find this inspiring because it embraces this idea of a gentle, loving death. And then I drew little circles and spirals, and then I've got some of the pages sort of earmarked, and I get it out regularly. And if I'm feeling depressed, I get it out and just read through my guidebook. And I have many meditations and visualizations, because for me, I love visualizations. So I've got it in my guidebook so that as I'm dying, I can either use this myself or have family and friends read it to me so that they feel like there's something they can do to help. And then also so that they'll read my little notes to them saying how very dear they are to me. So I think everyone should have their own guidebook. And so to summarize about the end of life doulas and the home funeral guides, the afterlife issues are currently not being addressed. The end-of-life doula is evolving. The focus is on looking backwards. Majority of people involved are hospice-related or hospice professionals, and a reticence in the community to talk about the spiritual goals. And this is my thank you to the AREI group that I am just so appreciative of being a part of, and all the service that you do and the classes you offer. So hats off, I bow to you. And I'm going to stop sharing now.
Thank you, Donna, as always. I've known Donna since 2013. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, that was so good. And I thought, in my mind, I'm a home funeral guide, and I have friends who are death doulas. And for me, the biggest difference is that death doulas do so much. I'm going to go get the body after they're dead and help the family take care of the body after they're dead. There's many times when I've sat with the family, I've become friends with the family. But a doula, in my mind, it's almost like they have to be in a collective, because they're spending so much time with the family. They're gonna kill themselves just from the sheer amount of work they're doing if they don't have a team or a collective to work with. I mean, do you think this is what I see as a difference? And it's often how I explain why I don't call myself a doula. I call myself a home funeral guide.
I think that is a good point. I think it's a good point.
I can pretty much work by myself, but a doula, if they are doing house cleaning or sitting vigil, or helping with the legacy, I mean, it's so much work. They almost need backup support. I don't know. The terminology can just, to me, that's just one way. I was going to ask if you thought that was a valid way to explain. the difference, one difference.
Well, I also see the end of life doula as a um, more of a paid position, and the home funeral guide is more like a calling.
Right. Yeah, because as you know, many of us as home funeral guides, what we do is charge for consulting, and a lot of the work I did early on was volunteer. And then I was learning that you're going to ruin this work for all of us unless you start charging. You're using your talent, your time to help these families. So now I can charge. But it feels like a calling. I knew from the get-go, anybody who thinks they're going to make money being a home funeral guide is so sadly mistaken. It's
Okay.
not a...
Thank you, Sarah. Does anyone else have any questions that they'd like to ask? Yes, Debbie. Just unmute you. Okay, you can unmute yourself then. Okay, go for it.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can,
Okay.
yes, indeed.
Since I was 21, I've been a birth doula. We didn't have a word for it. It was women helping women. And later I went back to school and became a midwife. And I practiced outside of the system. And I had heard about midwives for the dying way back in the 80s, when people were interviewing birth workers to create a model, how might that look? And I remember hearing about it then and realizing that birth work has been a calling for me, and that the death work would probably be a big part of my life. I just was certified a few months ago. I'm going to go for a second certification with a different organization in September. But this work is new to me. I only know information up here from learning in my course. But I was called to do birth work, and I also made a really good living doing it. And I hope to also be able to charge for my care that I give. And there are, just like as birth workers, well, built into the course I took as a death doula, was a lot of teaching about boundaries, how to create boundaries, what is expected, when and how. And it's the on-call part that wears people down, of course. And in that sense, you might want to have a partner, to share the on-call work. But I look forward to delving in and seeing what it's going to be like. I still need to go through the fire. And by fire, I don't mean a bad thing. I mean a good thing in really actually doing the work. But I do trust that there are really great teachers for boundaries, and also how to charge so that it's fair in your own community, what you're making, and also fair to the people who are going through this. So anyway, that's just my piece. And thank you, everybody, so much.
Daisy says, thank you, Donna. I have a friend living with me who is under hospice care. She really loves her hummingbird feeder outside her window. She loves the non-denominational minister who comes each week and sings both spiritual, patriotic and popular songs. Hospice has been wonderful guiding and preparing me for her death. So that's lovely that you've been able to be prepared for your friends transitioning. That's lovely. Yes, Pat.
Well, I'm going to first thank you, Donna. That was just awesome. And it was so informational and yet so inspiring. So it was like a healing experience of information for me. So thank you very much. And then I want to thank you especially for your information and guidance about what can I do now? That was the big question that came for me. knowing that you were doing this presentation today. And you answered that at the outset with making sure that we have I called it a medical directive, but a death directive, or a directive for how I want things to be at end stage for me. And could you speak to that a little bit more?
Here in the United States, there is horror story after horror story of people dying who did not have the paperwork that they needed. They did not appoint a person to speak for them should they be unable to speak for themselves. And for example, a gay couple didn't have any paperwork. One of the young men was in an accident. He didn't want to be put on life support. His mother came and said, too bad, I'm doing what I want, no paperwork, I'm the mother, and put him on life support against his wishes. So lots of stories like that. And it just makes everyone in the family and friends relaxed if there's something in place, if you could talk about these things ahead of time and get them sorted out. It's the wise thing to do, truly.
Okay,
Thank
that answered your question, Pat?
Yes, indeed. Thank you very
I did, thank you. That was just excellent, Donna, just excellent. It seems to me that not everyone would be called to be a doula or someone who could help someone transition to the next stage of life. Because of our own experiences or because of our own fears or what have you. And some of us would need a lot more help learning about this. Do the organizations that you mentioned, do they have like handout sheets or guides on how to work with people to help them prepare, or to give them guidance on how to have a green funeral or a green
Green burial.
whatever, what you would call, yes, or even what some of the options are or whatever.
The National Home Funeral Alliance, and the website is homefuneralalliance.org, has a lot of information and also several books about that very topic. And there's one book that I co-wrote called Undertaken with Love. Undertaken with Love. That goes really step by step through the things that you need to do for a home funeral and what kind of forms you need and who to ask, etc. And all the books are.
Do have states have the state cemetery offices, associations, or whatever come out with their codes or what in handling these things, so that, let's say for instance, I decide this is what I want, whatever, would in the state of Arizona, would my friends come up against all kinds of issues with the state office of cemeterial whatever because of my wishes?
It varies state by state, and it's really more of a cemetery issue. It's almost like you need to find out if the cemetery will allow a shroud burial, for example, or a green burial.
The cemetery would make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
So then, do you, one more question. Do you go around and give these talks to
You know,
groups?
I used to do it an awful lot, but I don't anymore because at this time of my life, I'm focusing on having fun and experiencing joy with Roger, my wonderful companion in Mexico.
Okay.
I don't have a question, just a comment following this last exchange. That in California, they've had different seminars, especially at some of the senior housing areas, where a lot of these people like Donna come in and put their information around, and the people are exposed to it. So senior centers or probably any senior over 55 housing group, I've noticed that they are becoming more and more aware of this. And thank you, Donna, for all of your work in this area. You're a pioneer.
Yeah, Donna, I'm so happy that you are at a joyful stage in your life. And I just want to say to everybody, I know for a fact that your paperwork is done and your family knows exactly what to do. You preach.
That's so
You
true.
practice what you preach.
And I even quiz my daughters. I quiz my daughters and say, okay, I'm in the hospital. I've got pneumonia. I can't speak for myself. What do? Do you allow them to resuscitate me or put in an intubation? And see what they say. Make sure that they're on the money.
Barbara Reed has brought up a very interesting comment. She said that the 5wishes.org offers a free download of a document that can be notarized and become a legal document. And that's able to express your details of end-of-life wishes and funeral details. It's excellent and comprehensive in the US. So you might like to make a note of that. It's 5wishesaltogether.org. Are there any other questions?
That's an excellent document, but in some states you need more than that.
Donna, thank you so much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to really piggyback on what you were just saying. As a mental health professional who specializes working with parents whose children have died suddenly, and looking at the funeralization process for them, as well as, you know, children who have certainly taken their own life through suicide. Oftentimes, the information that comes out is a big surprise to the family. And so with your statement just now about you have shared this information with your daughters, you have come to an agreement about what it is that's needed. I just think that's so incredibly valuable, because I end up picking up a lot of pieces from parents and other bereaved people who they wanted to have their mother cremated and their mother wanted to be buried, and they have these horrendous nightmares about the burial process, or they wanted to have a service here or not a service or whatever, and the children have had different ideas, and it's creating a lot of depression and anxiety for the bereaved. So I really appreciate you talking about the fact that you've talked with your family about this and they're well aware of what it is that you want, and you've been able to come to, perhaps even for some families it might be a compromise of what the children can deal with and tolerate and what they cannot. So thanks for bringing that aspect through. It's going to make our life, those of us who are professionals, a lot easier.
Thank you, Jane.
Craig, I'm really interested in this area of putting out resources for people for the spiritual aspects of dying. The fact that what we were talking about, the fact that there's very little emphasis, and I think the idea of a book with all of the evidence and quotes and thing. I think this is just such a marvelous idea. Donna, I'm just wondering, I know you've written a lot of books. Have you thought about putting what you've put together for yourself into a book that could be shared?
No, haven't thought about it.
Because I could, Craig, what are your thoughts on this? I just think, this would be such a lovely thing.
Yeah, I think it's a marvelous idea. I think that we do need to spend more time helping people to understand, because there's such ignorance about this area, and I think it'd be wonderful. And we could publish a book like that if you were interested in putting one together. I certainly would like to do that.
What are your thoughts, Donna?
I'm certainly open to that possibility. So yes, we can talk offline about that.
Okay, wonderful. Just out of interest, I don't know if you know William Buhlman's book, his book about the afterlife. William Buhlman is an out-of-body experiencer. And at the end of his book, he has some wonderful scripts of tapes. You can make your own tape to be played while you are dying. And he has some really, really good material there that you might like to have a look at.
Susie, you've made a comment in the Zoom group chat that I'm not too sure what it means. I'm going to unmute you and let you ask your question. You're unmuted.
You're discussing putting a book together, even just a guide, so as if people are interested, they could start working on putting something together themselves, just some ideas.
Yes.
That's my idea, Susie, that seeing a model of something that Donna has done would just inspire other people. I agree it should be a personal thing, but just having that idea of a model would be very helpful.
Yeah, it would be. It would be. Is there any other questions? Has anyone else got any other questions? Yeah. Barbara, yes, I can see your hand up, and I'll get to you, Ruth, next.
No, I'm Ruth.
Yeah, I said I'd get to you in a minute, Ruth. I said Barbara first.
Okay. All right.
So, Barbara, you're unmuted,
Okay.
darling.
I just wanted to say that the 5 wishes is a good guide, whether or not your state allows you to have it notarized. It's a booklet. It's not just a page. And it asks questions in many, many areas that many of us never think of. For instance, it asks about all the treatment. And one of the questions is, do you want to have antibiotics if you have pneumonia? There are all these things that are covered. And it also talks about your own comfort when you're dying. Do you want music to be played? Do you want loved ones to bring in tapes that you can listen to? I like silence. So my children and my family are all involved in what it's going to be like for my death, which will be very simple. And I've told them I want them to get together on Zoom. No traveling, no hotels, no meals, nothing to wear anybody out. They can get together with my memories on Zoom for a brief discussion. I have nieces who are very musically gifted. They can choose something they want to play that would be tasteful, and it'll just be joyful. It won't be some dreary thing where they've had to drive in the car for days and all that. And then there'll be my donation to Science Care, and then the cremation, which they won't be part of. They don't have to think about that at all, though they know it's going to happen. And that's part of what I have had notarized and made up for them. So
Great. Thanks for that.
Go 5 Wishes booklet short. Okay.
Right.
Thanks for that, Barbara. Okay, Ruth, would you like to speak now?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Since you brought up Bill Buhlman, his wife, Susan, is a Doulas also. And they together have written a book about all this, and they have a 3-day course at the Monroe Institute, which I think they're streaming now. But his book is on Amazon. You know, their book about the procedures similar to the 5 wishes. But I just bring that up because I think that's a good source also, the course and his book. Their book, it's written by both of Susan and Bill.
Wonderful.
That's
Thank you, Ruth. Kate, you're on a phone. Is there anything that you want to say? Because we haven't got a visual to know whether you want to talk or not. Is there anything that you wish to say? Kate? Nicole Bohr, is there anything you wish to say?
Thanks.
I think that was Kate.
Yep, Kate.
I said no, thank you.
Right.
Okay, darling. Nicole Bohr, did you want to say anything? We haven't got any visual for you, so I can't tell if you want to talk or not. Okay. Nancy, similar position. Do you wish to speak?
I did put some resources in the chat box. Caring Info is another really good resource for advanced directives. And it's sort of a service of the National Hospice and Palliative Care organization here in the United States. And also, even though we haven't touched on it directly, but sometimes even once you've completed your advanced directives, talking about them with your family and healthcare providers can be challenging. And this website, the Conversation Project.org, has all kinds of wonderful booklets, and they're all absolutely free, and they're in many languages. So that's a helpful source in terms of discussing your wishes with your family and doctors.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Donna.
Anyone else who would like to say anything?
Laurie.
Laurie.
We haven't
Laurie.
asked you yet if you'd like to say.
Sorry, Laurie. You're unmuted, Laurie.
Okay, thanks. I'm thinking about, there's something out there called End of Life University.
Yes.
And it's, the director is a doctor, and right now I know her first name is Karen, and I can't think of her last name.
Thank you, Laurie.
Anyway, there's a whole bunch of resources there of everything to do with end of life. And they've even done a little bit of work on the afterlife, not as much as I'd like to see.
Yeah. The person is Dr. Karen Wyatt at the End of Life
That's
University.
it.
Yeah, that's who that one is. Thank you, ladies, for letting us know. I didn't remember her last name either. Okay, good. Thanks, Laurie. Kate, have we asked Kate? I think we've been through everyone. Anyone else got any questions that they have that they'd like to raise? I don't know about, I don't know enough about America to answer that question that not all hospitals have morgues. I think you'll find that all hospitals are legislated to have morgues. They must have morgues. So that's incorrect about a hospital not having a morgue. Okay, any other questions before we finish up? Wonderful. Wendy, would you like to thank Donna for her wonderful, oops, we've got a message just popped up. Okay, Wendy, would you like to thank Donna for her presentation, please, today?
Donna, that was absolutely fantastic. Really thoroughly enjoyed it. It was informative. I think it's such valuable information, and I'm really pleased we've got it on video. I think for me, the thing that's emerging, and I think you made this very clear, is this need for the more spiritual aspect, need for information. And Craig, I think this is something that AREI is in a position to really put something together. What are your thoughts on that, Craig?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very important to have that as part of what we are helping people along with, because the transition is an important part of what we teach. So, Donna, if you wanted to do something, just let me know, and we'll try to help you put something together.
I think that's, for me, that's the big thing that's come out of today's talk. And thank you so much. And Roger, thank you for helping Donna get the technology ready for us to share this, because it's been absolutely invaluable.
Wonderful.
Thank you, everybody else.